Good evening, I'm Kelly Wright. Welcome to tonight's program, and we'll get right to it. Beyond my opening observations, I'll explain this. There is breaking news that many of you are no doubt familiar with right now coming out of Minneapolis about the charges of the 4 police officers involved in the brutal murder that all of us witnessed via cell phone videos from people trying to intervene, trying to help save the life of George Floyd as he lay on the ground, subdued, detained with handcuffs, and yet one officer, Derek Chauvin, continued to keep his knee on his neck as George Floyd continually said, "I can't breathe." And what was so heartbreaking is that he began to cry out for his mother, who was his deceased mother, saying, Mama, help, I can't breathe." We watched a Black man murdered in front of our very eyes, and the country and the world has been watching because none of us with any conscience, with any bone of humanity in our lives could not watch that and not be horrified. So now the charges are coming forward. Attorney General Keith Ellison making it very clear that all 4 officers involved in this case have been charged. We go now to Attorney Mark Harris. He's joining us from his office in Sacramento, California. But it's very important that Attorney Mark Harris is with us because he is also a colleague and a partner with Attorney Ben Crump, the famed civil rights attorney who is representing the George Floyd family in this case. And Mark, good of you to join us today. One thing that Ben said, Attorney Ben Crump said earlier today during a news conference standing beside the son of George Floyd, was that this is a bittersweet moment for the George Floyd family because they would much rather prefer George Floyd being alive and well. Instead, they're dealing with getting him justice. And I'd just like to know your take on this.
Whether it's the family of Breonna Taylor, who we represent, or Ahmaud Arbery, who we represent, the family of both of those victims, or now the family of George Floyd. Everyone would rather have their loved one back, Kelly. In the civil rights practice that our law firm has, we have a disproportionate number of wrongful death cases where police violence has been the cause of the inappropriate taking of human life. Every one of the folks that we have as clients would rather have their loved one back. It is absolutely bittersweet, the moment that we're in right now with these charges that are being filed as we speak against Chauvin and the other officers, actually former officers, no longer with the honor of wearing the shield.
You know, it was very, I take you back to when this happened.
Yes.
And we saw the mayor of Minneapolis at that point in time point out the fact that no Black man should walk throughout life and be considered that walking while Black is a death sentence.
Yes.
And there was uproar. There was support of what he said, but there was uproar in the streets because people were so angry and agitated, and it turned ugly. It turned violent. As violent people stepped in to try to distract and obscure the real justice at hand, and that was the justice for George Floyd. Tell me about these elevated charges for Derek Chauvin, who is the officer we see with his knee on the neck of George Floyd. And I'm going to do what Ben Crump has said: not 1 minute, not 2 minutes, not 3 minutes, not 4 minutes, not 5 minutes, not 6 minutes, not 7 minutes, not 8 minutes, but 9 minutes when George Floyd was pleading for help. The elevated charge of second-degree murder against that police officer means what now as they move this case forward?
It first of all is the correct charge. I know that my colleague, Attorney Crump, has argued that first-degree murder would even be appropriate. I wrote an article almost 2 weeks ago, actually it was a week and a half ago, right when this happened, and I argued that second-degree murder, without question, should have been the charge. Third-degree murder, I feel, and more importantly, Attorney Crump feels, was inappropriate. Let's go through slowly what each of these things mean. First-degree murder under the the penal code in Minnesota requires premeditation and deliberation. In other words, you have to be able to show that the person who committed the homicide had preconceived thoughts and had a chance to cool off. So if it were preconceived thoughts in the heat of battle, you wouldn't have first degree. If it were preconceived thoughts, you had a moment or two, or in this case, 8 minutes and 46 seconds to cool off. Those two elements would have you potentially run the risk of a conviction for first degree murder. Second degree murder removes the premeditation element and leaves in place the deliberation element. So you were hot for whatever reason. You had a chance to cool off, 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and you didn't. That would typically fit right down the middle of a second degree murder under the code of Minnesota. The challenge is there has to be a showing of intent in order to get the second degree murder conviction that they will be seeking very shortly against Chauvin in Minnesota. That's going to be, as it typically is, difficult to show. They have an abundance of evidence. Any statements he made, anything he was videotaped doing, anything he said on audio tape, the witness statements, all of the evidence has to play itself out. At the end of that process, we think there'll be enough for a second degree conviction for Chauvin. Third degree was the inappropriate one. That shows basically reckless indifference. That shows that it was an accident, if you will, that it was negligent homicide. I don't think anything in this matter shows some reckless indifference on the part of Chauvin. I think it was a deliberate action on his part leading to Mr. Floyd's death.
All right, I'm talking to Mark Harris, attorney Mark Harris, who is a member of the Ben Crump law firm. And we're going to come back with much more because, Mark, when we come back, I want to talk about the fact that the other three officers, the breaking news, of course, is that they too have been charged with aiding and abetting with second degree murder. We'll talk about that and drill down on what that charge means. We'll be back with more of the Kelly Wright Show right after this. Welcome back to the program. And so we've been following the breaking news coming out of Minneapolis, and many of you no doubt know that there have been charges brought against all four police officers, former police officers, because they were fired by the mayor in the days after this outrageous, egregious act of just total disregard for human life. And you just have to question if there was any humanity or morality in the officers involved in this. But joining me is attorney Mark Harris. And Mark, the other three officers, as we are finding out, were being charged for aiding and abetting because they were there. They saw what was going on. They didn't do anything. They didn't intervene and say enough is enough, get off of him. And even after the paramedics arrived and said, you got to get off so we can take a pulse, he kept his knee on the neck of George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And the one officer continued to look the other way.
Right. This is what's wrong with policing in America, Kelly. It's that blue code which transcends every oath that these officers have taken, the trust of the public that we invest in them, the very United States Constitution that we all hold dear. That's what's wrong with policing in this country, particularly as it relates to the African American community. Let's review the facts for a minute. You were perfect in terms of your review of the facts. You had Chauvin with his knee on the neck of Mr. Floyd. You had two other officers with their full body weight on the back of Mr. Floyd at the same time. So it wasn't Chauvin acting alone and the other three standing around. It was Chauvin who was actually engaged in pressing the knee on the neck of George Floyd. Two other officers who put their full body weight on his back, preventing his diaphragm from being able to receive oxygen that then would go to his heart, his other vital organs, and his brain. And you had the fourth officer who was standing watch. Everybody who saw the video saw that officer who was standing there with a position to prevent anyone from intervening. That is absolutely preposterous behavior But unfortunately, that's what happens when your predominant commitment is to the blue rather than the law. That's why it's important to charge these other officers. In the state of Minnesota, regular citizens have to comply with what they call a Good Samaritan rule. You or I, if we were in the state of Minnesota, would have to render aid in an emergency situation, or we could be charged with a misdemeanor. They have one of the few states in the country that have a Good Samaritan law in the books. This isn't that situation. These people were sworn officers who have an even higher duty. And it wasn't just that they should have intervened to provide assistance. How about not causing the very harm that led to Mr. Floyd's murder?
As you were talking, I was thinking about the blue line and how they protect each other in situations like this. And this was a time that they should have acted according to that Good Samaritan law. And there's a reason for that Good Samaritan law, because we all should be reminded that we must do good for others. And certainly you expect that from a law enforcement officer. And so now with these charges coming forth, there have been the number of protests that have been going on for so many days since the death of George Floyd. And I went out to talk to protesters yesterday. We're going to come back and we'll show that later in the broadcast. But the bottom line is, Mark, what does this do for us as a nation? And what does it say to the world that we are seeking justice in this case, that we are bringing people to trial for killing an unarmed Black man who was already handcuffed, detained, and you allowed him to die in your custody, and you even caused that murder as all of us saw?
I think what's on display is something that my colleague and partner Ben Crump talks about very eloquently. There are two different standards of justice in the United States. One for haves and one for have-nots. One for African Americans and one for Caucasians. That can't exist. We cannot exist as a country. We can't thrive and move forward and heal as a country until we recognize that. You made a paraphrased statement about what had been said relative to being African American and what that meant. One of the things that has been said by more than one government official, mayors and governors throughout the country, is to be born Black should not be a death sentence. We're not even talking about walking while Black or driving while Black or running or jogging while Black. We're talking about our very existence as African Americans potentially leading to our demise. That cannot continue. So in some ways, I think America is waking up. 50 different states have had demonstrations. Some states have had more than one. Of course, California has had many different cities that have had demonstrations. All 50 states have had demonstrations. Australia, England, France, a number of countries throughout the world, a number of African countries have had demonstrations in solidarity and support of what we're fighting for here. This is a big moment. And the real question is, who are we and who will we be after this moment ends? After George Floyd's memorial tomorrow, his burial, who will you be, America, in terms of moving forward relative to the relationship between law enforcement and the African American community?
Very good point. I'm talking to attorney Mark Harris, and we're talking about the four police officers, former police officers. They were fired, and the charges have come against all four of them now. Attorney General Keith Ellison, who, by the way, is African American, serving in the capacity as Attorney General there in Minnesota, taking on the case because the Hennepin County prosecutor, Mark, it appeared that he was not going to do his job, that he was beholding to the police and that blue line that we talk about. We'll come back and talk about more about that, how that is also a systemic flaw within our criminal justice system. Back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. I'm talking to attorney Mark Harris. He is a member of the Ben Crump Law Firm and another civil rights attorney who's actively engaged in helping people, especially when their rights are violated. And certainly the greatest right that we've seen violated is what's happening to African-American men, women, and children when there is an abuse of power, police power, or an abuse of white people inflicting harm on people because of the color of their skin. And we've seen this over and over again. And as a result of that, Mark, a lot of people, their anger has spilled and erupted into the streets. No one ever wanted violence out in the streets during protests, including the family of George Floyd, but
Yes.
kept saying, do not commit acts of violence. This brings no justice to George Floyd. And then there's Ahmaud Arbery, there's Breonna Taylor, there's this Trayvon Martin, there's Tamir Rice, there's Eric Garner, who also said in 2014 on the streets of Staten Island, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. So a lot of people had this pent up anger, black, white, brown, yellow, just tired of seeing these kinds of atrocities inflicting over and over again. And I want to mark a point here, Mark. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo stated so many times, there is an injustice within the criminal justice system, and it is based on racism.
Absolutely.
From the top law enforcement, the commander of New York Governor Mario Cuomo. Mario Cuomo was his dad, Andrew Cuomo. When he said that, what did that do to you as an attorney who works and operates in this space?
He's absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that our governor, Gavin Newsom, I'm very proud to be a Californian. I'm very proud to be one of the almost 40 million that is under the jurisdiction of our governor, Gavin Newsom. He looked at the media and the world yesterday and said, this is not an African-American problem, it's our problem. And by ours, he meant white Americans, he meant the system, he meant the government, he meant the law enforcement community. He said it's our problem and we have to fix it. I completely agree with that. Ben Crump says something that, again, I think is supremely eloquent and accurate. He said, Mark, you know this to be true. When a criminal defendant, in a lot of cases an African-American, is brought before the court, everything turns white. The bailiff is white, the clerk is white, the prosecutor is white, the judge is white, most of the jury is white. How do we expect in that system that this person's going to get a fair trial? So it's not just the online law enforcement member that needs to be more open-minded, more aware, more willing to be conciliatory. All the way through the process, there need to be changes. To the specific point about the two different levels of justice, there is definitely a Caucasian level of justice in this country, and there is an African-American level of justice in this country. And as long as they coexist, pulling in opposite directions as far as this country is concerned, we will not heal.
And healing is what we seek. Healing is what we need. Will this charge or these charges against these four men who are now going to face justice?
Potentially.
Will this appease some of the people who have been protesting? Will this bring more peace to the streets?
I will tell you this, and this is what I've said to my age contemporaries, my professional colleagues. I don't even purport to attempt to speak on behalf of the myriad of folks who are out there demonstrating. Some people are doing it for one reason and others for another. There has been rioting and there's been some violence. There's been a range, but I'll say this. We have a process that we're going through. First, it's charging, which is what is being done. You'll go through a certain pretrial process, as you know, Kelly, and then there will be a trial. If we have a result from that trial, similar to the result we had in the Rodney King criminal case, and we've had in so many of the criminal cases throughout America, Zimmerman with Trayvon, stand your ground. That was a legitimate defense that he was able to use in Florida to escape prosecution. If we have another result like that, it's going to be a long, hot summer, like they used to say back in the day. Yeah. What we've seen up to this point will pale by comparison. I really think people are fed up. And I don't want to, one of the things that, and I have the complete and total respect for Attorney General Ellison. I'm so glad that he is in the place where he is at this point in time. I think he's absolutely the perfect person in terms of his ethics and in terms of his professionalism and credibility. But even with his great talent, you put a case before a jury. The way our criminal justice system works, you receive from the jury their verdict, and then we move forward. These are 3 Caucasian officers and 1 Asian American officer. They will receive a different level of justice than they would if they were African American, either African American, in quotes, suspects or African American officers. So we have to wait and see. We just have to wait and see, Kelly, and trust. I've been practicing law for most of my life, almost 40 years. It's been 30 and some change. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have faith ultimately in the system. So I would ask your viewers to have faith in the system, to do a lot of praying between now and when this verdict comes out, and for the right thing to happen in the right way.
Talking to Mark Harris, attorney at law, a member of the Ben Crump law team and law firm. We're going to come back with one more. I want to talk to you, Mark, when we come back about what this means in terms of how African-American men, women, and children should view their trust or distrust of law enforcement and how we move forward. I'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the program. So I'm talking to attorney Mark Harris. He is a member of the Ben Crump law firm. And Mark, we were talking about all of the things that have been going on. This has been a busy weekend. I mean, a busy day, if you will.
Yes.
Excuse me. There's so much information downloading in my brain to my mouth. And sometimes they used to say, make sure your brain is engaged before your mouth is in gear. So having said all that, this kind of breaking news that we see, this is what so many protesters on the streets that I've spoken to really wanted to see, that justice would start, that the wheels of justice would start rolling. You know, as Dr. King has said, the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. Now, having said that, there is still the fact, as you alluded to earlier, will justice be served even though the charges are coming forward? And what do we say to African-American families about keeping their men, women, and children safe and lifted up so that they know how to, one, talk to police and get home safely?
Yes. Let me tell you, I can only, if I am allowed to do this, Kelly, I can only share with your viewers what goes on in our home. I have 2 adult sons now. You're well aware of that. When they were younger, we gave them the talk. Everybody knows what the talk is. Yep. It's instructions on how to behave if pulled over by law enforcement, or in some way you interact with law enforcement, what it is you're supposed to do. Make sure you keep your hands visible. Don't make any rash moves. Don't run, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not enough. I mean, Mr. Floyd complied with the officers. So my young nephews, I was listening to a conversation. You know, we have Zoom conversations around this house all the time, Kelly. Everybody's on a Zoom conference all day. And I heard my 2 sons having one that I was unfamiliar with. I didn't know who they were talking to. So today I asked them, who are you talking to? And they were talking to their young cousins, their young African-American male cousins, whose parents wanted them to talk to my sons to give them a sense of hope for the future. These young nephews and nieces were despondent, and you've got the COVID-19 malaise that leads right to this. They've just been down for the past several months. So what my sons told them, I share with your viewers. We have no choice but to have faith and have confidence. Those of us who have a biblical reference for this, I would suggest that we go to the biblical references that we have that have brought us peace. We had Deon Taylor, the great director of the movie Black and Blue, who was on our radio show this week. You know, I do a weekly radio show, Kelly, which you supported. Deon Taylor was on, and he said, you've got to dream. And once you set a goal in your dream, you got to go beyond that. He said, don't let this take the dream away from you. We've got to tell our kids that. We've got to tell each other that. But we really have to make sure that we understand our children are watching this entire process. They're watching how we react. If we start talking hatred, if we start embracing things that we know aren't within our faith or our fidelity, it has a bad effect, a bad after effect. We have to really be careful how we present ourselves to one another and definitely to the younger generation.
Mark, thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate all of your efforts in helping not only people in California, but people across the United States and the world. Attorney Mark Harris of the Ben Crump Law Firm. Continue to keep fighting the good fight, and you're always not
appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly.
All right. Back with more of the program, and we'll get into that protest the way that we were going to cover this story, but because of the changing news, obviously we wanted to bring this to you with some context from attorney Mark Harris, who is a close associate of attorney Ben Crump. Back with more after this.
Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright from the nation's capital in front of the White House. I'm here in Washington, D.C., focusing on a protest that's going on in the wake of what President Donald Trump did here the other day when he called out the National Guard, members of the military, to move in on a peaceful demonstration taking place. So he could walk over here to St. John's Church, which you just see over my shoulder here, and hold up a Bible and not pray for this nation, not even open up that Bible to give a scripture to heal this nation. So I thought I'd come down here amongst the protesters to show you and to capture the atmosphere of what they're encountering, to capture the sense of purpose that they have in raising up their hands and saying, hands up, don't shoot, and reiterating what we heard George Floyd say, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. We also heard those words in 2014 from Eric Garner. But basically, they have come out here today to continue to peacefully protest and demonstrate their displeasure, not only with the President of the United States, but with people in terms of their racial divide. One sign that I observed here said, if one is in chains, we are all in chains. Another person said, my life should not matter more than Black lives matter. So we're going to go through the crowd today and give you an excerpt and a taste of what goes on here in the Washington, D.C. area, the nation's capital. And I should point out that the Mayor Muriel Bowser, has expressed outrage and just disappointment in how the president treated peaceful protesters. And she has stated over and over again that this is a nation where we should not be sending armed military soldiers into the streets against American people, especially when they are peacefully assembling, which is the First Amendment right. And those are my opening observations.
We're here because, frankly, we're tired of it. We pretty much live lives pretty peaceful, pretty outside of usually what's going on, but sometimes you have to decide when enough is enough. We don't like seeing anybody murdered by the police. We don't like seeing any race being put down by the police. But when Black lives are being put down at an exponentially high rate, then it's time to step up. It's time to say something, especially when it's been going on for about 400 plus years.
I'm tired of waking up every other day, every week, every other month, and seeing a Black man, Black woman, Black person killed by the police. It's too much. I'm tired of waking up. That could be my brother, that could be my sister, that could be a friend, that could be my father. I'm just tired of seeing it. The message I'm hoping to convey is that, one, we won't stop. We won't be silenced. We're going to be out here. And two, just the police brutality it's a systemic thing. It needs to be erased and eradicated completely. Like, They're not hearing the people. They're over here talking more about riots, looting, and property damage, but not addressing the main issue. You can talk about all this stuff getting destroyed all you want, but it don't mean anything if you don't address the actual murder. That man.
We have a leader right now who fails to see what's going on outside of his own house. About 4,000 people in the past week were arrested because of protesting because of a murder of a black man. It took them 3 days to arrest the cop, and there's still 3 other men that haven't been charged yet for his murder. And George Floyd's murder wasn't the only isolated incident. It's a systemic pattern. Like we said, it starts at the top, and I don't have much faith in our president right now who can enact the right change to do so.
That man's not real. Everything he does is for TV. You gonna gash your own people in the nation's capital just so you can walk across the street and then take a picture? You don't address any real issues. That man's a joke. Everything, for me personally, to the government level, it means nothing because it's not going to change until it happens from within. But I feel like what people can do is educate and correct and check those in their communities.
And vote. Above everything else, vote. Starts at the top. We select our leaders. It's our own fault in a way. We put this man in the White House. We gotta take him out. It's gone too far.
I'm a 30-year-old black man. I'm being targeted. I want to show also young people how to protest, how to be active, how to be engaged, but I also want justice. It's enough is enough. I feel like you have to use the same systemic racist systems that we have to obliterate racism. You have to vote. You have to be politically engaged. I want to have the same freedoms and the same protection in the law that everyone else has. I don't think that's a lot that people are asking for. If someone else who hasn't had the same presentation as me gets pulled over, they might be okay. But if I do, I have to think about that risk. And I don't think that's a way for people to live in America. I don't think people are asking for much. We're asking for accountability. We're asking for opportunity. We're asking for equality. And I believe that we should also set examples of how to protest and how to do those things. There are other ways to get the outcomes that we want, but we have to use those same systems. And in order for us to use the systems, we have to rid them of the racism that has been in them for centuries.
I noticed that you have the American flag upside down, which is a sign of distress, and you're standing in front of the White House. What is it you're trying to let people know?
That is the opposite of what our president should be. This is the opposite of what the flag stands for, that the world is turned upside down and we should all be out in the streets with our hair on fire, every single one of us. And we're here to demand better from our government because it's long past due.
The events that have transpired over the past week, and then you factor in the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many other African Americans have lost their lives. You're out here to also make a statement about coming together as a nation. What do you want the world to know?
For the
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless.
We'll talk to your colleague over here.
Sure.
Sir, if you don't mind, I'm Kelly Wright, host of The Kelly Wright Show, which airs on the Black News Channel. I was just talking to your colleague here, and she was explaining why you have the flag in a sign of distress. Could you tell me your name and where you're from and why this is so important?
Sure. My name is Tanuj Diora. I'm from here in Washington, D.C.
And your purpose for being here today is what?
I mean, there's a lot of horrible things that have gone on recently and have been going on for years and years and frankly centuries. The tipping point for me, though, was yesterday, seeing an unprovoked attack on my fellow citizens, my fellow residents, using their constitutional rights, and I don't care what the reason was, without warning, or with very limited warning, before the curfew, being attacked, including the press being attacked. As Shannon said, that's the soul of our country. And it's not just our country. Our country's always been the leader for the world. I've always been a proud American. And, when I think about why I'm a proud American, it's not just because I was born in the U.S. It's because of what this country stands for and what this country stands for. And when we see this country has given up on its role as a leader for all of humanity, when we see that many of the people in this country don't want to see it, when we seem to be on a path where in the past at least things were always getting better for all Americans, and it seems like for the last 3.5 years we're just not on that course. Even when the opposition of who I usually vote for was in power, there was always a sense that we're all Americans.
So I'm actually driving behind a large crowd of protesters who are marching past George Washington University and the hospital. This is the route that they can actually march all the way to Georgetown. It's not known how far they will march, but they are chanting "No peace, no justice," and "Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter." And this is the sentiment here in Washington, D.C. So if the president thought he was going to bring an end to peaceful protests, he was wrong. And these are mostly white and black students, youth, young professionals, and some older Americans who are stating with their signs Black Lives Matter, and also stating with their signs that they want justice. They want justice for George Floyd, and they want justice for the American people, and particularly African Americans. They're saying it must come to an end, and it starts now. So you can see that the protesters are actually walking through the traffic here in the Washington, D.C. area. This is a very busy thoroughfare, and you can see some of the protesters are stating with their hands up, "No justice, no peace." Welcome back, and now for my final word. I can recall the days as a child growing up here in Washington, D.C., and my mother driving by the White House, and I would look at her with a gleeful question saying, I wonder if the president is inside, Mom. Mom, can we see the president? Well, times have changed. We find ourselves living in a new normal that is quite abnormal. And instead, when people walk by the White House today, some of them are scratching their heads wondering, where do we go from here? As I begin to close this, over my shoulder there is St. John's Church. And the President Donald Trump, held up the Bible. But he didn't open it. He didn't read scriptures like, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Or blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. He didn't open it to give a message of healing and unity. The sad reality is he didn't open it at all. And upon further reflection in terms of what's happening in our country, the racial division that we have to address these things. And we've heard from people here who have stated that we do need to come together. And we must pray together as a nation for humility and pray that God heals our land. I'm Kelly Wright. May you be righted, ignited, and united to spread not fear, not hatred, but to spread justice, knowledge, love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
Let your peace abound on holy ground and lead us with your guidance. Oh Lord, we need you. We need you right now, Lord. Hey. Oh Lord, we need you. We need you right now. I wanna let the world know.